our next talk is Flavia Santos. Yeah. Now, Dr. Flavia Santos has been awarded the prestigious UCD Astra Fellowship 2019 to 2024, a research fellow at the Yeary Institute for Public Policy and an assistant professor at the School of Philosophy since 2018. Dr. Santos is also a member of the UNESCO's Inclusion Policy Lab and chair elected of the MCLS, the Mathematical Computation and Learning Society. Wow, okay, that's it, yeah, 2023 to 2026. She's also the principal investigator of the Arithmos project funded by the Irish Research Council and the Enigma project, educational, and I'm slowing down, neuroscience in games for mathematics on the Emrys Plus funded by the European Commission. Oh, round of applause. And that's just for me reading it. That's for me reading it. Okay, so, do you want me to speak some more?
No, the funny thing is that I apparently become Korean. So,
okay. So
that's the tricky.
So that should be easy.
Yeah,
just rename. We go rename. Oh, yeah, go home. Right. Okay. And she spoke on the panel last year, and she's let's say the first. Let's say she said, but I'm not a black hero of mathematics. No. And I'm saying, as a neuroscientist working in the field about mathematics and anxiety, we consider her as a black hero of mathematics. So
very kind of you.
Very, very kind. It's the truth. There you go. Cool.
Okay, let's see if it works now. So it should. That's sharing, and I'm just not.
Okay, I should carry on talking some more. And here we go.
Video.
Yep. Ready?
Yes.
Are we good?
Okay. I hope so.
Okay. Very, very good. All right.
Yes.
And we have to say, you are the first representative of Ireland for the Black Heroes of Mathematics.
Oh,
there you go. Yeah, so we like the show the diversity. So here we go. So.
Well, thank you so much. It's such a great honor to be here today. So good afternoon, everyone, those online and those present. I hope you can consider me also representative of Brazil.
Absolutely.
Yes. So the talk is Coping Maths Anxiety in Our Community. I would like to say thank you very much for all the organizers, all the societies that contributed, people from the LMS, especially Professor Meyer for this amazing invitation. So it's really special for me. And let's get started. I organized this talk including 3 parts. So why maths anxiety should be a concern for all of us. We are here celebrating maths, and why we should talk about someone that is afraid of maths. So I think that's important. Then I will bring some historical and environmental factors that I believe that are important in the context of this event. And finally, I will bring some critical factors that we see on research related to maths anxiety in our community. My talk requires lots of caveats because, as I was saying before, I'm not a mathematician, I'm not a maths educator, so I'm a psychologist with a background in neuroscience. So that's my perspective in this presentation. Also, I want to say that Blackness is a universe. It's not just the tone of your skin or the texture of your hair. It's in which country you are born, in which moment in time, historically speaking, socioeconomic factors. So there are many other factors involving the way you become or that you feel yourself as a Black person. So it's really hard. That's why I chose the term community. And I want you to understand that we have different communities and perhaps understand community more in the sense of minorities or in the sense of inequities. Another thing that I want to say is that most examples I will be showing are from the United States. And this is precisely because we have strong literature in that area. So it's also for encouraging researchers from other places to consider that it's important when we are sometimes generalizing things and not as necessarily identical in all places. Then, okay, so part one, just a small overview, because not all of you are familiar with this topic. So I would like to start and hope it works. I think I'm mute here, not? No? Okay. Yeah, okay. So yeah, that's the problem. So no. Okay, so I chose this video that was created in one of my projects, the Arithmos project. Arithmos means numbers, and it's was funded by the Irish Research Council. And this video was created for children and for parents, so it should be a language that's familiar for all, and that's a good way to start talking about maths anxiety. And now you cannot listen.
And even sing.
Yeah. How do I do that?
There's a monster in there.
How do I do? Yes, I mute and then it's not working. Oh, okay.
I'm on this.
Yes.
I'm on mute. I'm already on mute.
Okay, shall I? No.
Some children feel nervous.
No. If I unmute, then it's echo. If I just
What
let
would that affect? I can try turning these speakers off.
audio.
They did ask us. It was asked if you could share the link afterwards and they can watch the video.
Oh, sure. No problem. So can I, okay. Now yeah, it's working okay. So this work was a collaboration between TUD, Technological University Dublin and University College Dublin. And please like the video because we have lots of material on the internet that are not evidence-based, and this is. So it's important to help kids to learn properly. Okay, so now that you know the basis, we can point four things that I believe are crucial here. So first of all, maths anxiety is a feeling of tension or apprehension towards numbers, symbols, quantities, anything related to problem solving. So obviously it will appear in classroom, but it's also present in ordinary life. So a child that is, I don't know, at the beach and wants to buy an ice cream and is tense if it's getting the right change or something like that. This feeling of tension, apprehension, and fear towards maths is weakly related to intelligence. And this is very important because teachers and parents tends to, oh, if this child is not succeeding, maybe this child is not very bright. And once you put this label in their faces, you change their possibilities. So this is very important. The other thing is that the fear towards maths is it meets all criteria for specific phobia, which means that this fear is equivalent to have fear of spiders or any other thing that you might consider. Maths anxiety is not yet in the medical manuals, but that's a question possibly of time, which means that sooner or later it will happen, and it will have an impact on treatment. Pharmacological, most of the cases. But what's important for us is that we know that there are environmental factors that are triggering or worsening those feelings, and then we can work on it in our work. Maths anxiety is multidimensional, which means that we are showing here 4, but we have even possibly more dimensions. So one is physiological, like the person might be shaking, sweating, having heart race, butterflies in the stomach. In the affective dimension, you could include classically fear, but also anger, contempt, many different expressions despising maths, sadly. Behavioral, so any kind of behaviors that would help the child to avoid experiences with mathematics. So it's the child that gives the first number that comes to mind when the teacher asks something, or they just say, I don't know, they even try, or they start to work very slowly. So before the class finishes, they are far away from the difficult items, or they ask toilet breaks, etc. In the cognitive, it's the child that is thinking, what if I do it wrong? What if the teacher asks my name? What if the others start laughing at me? So instead of thinking of the calculation, they are on it. And more alarming is the fact that this anxiety is present in anticipation, during the learning, and in assessment experience. So it's the child that one night before is not even sleeping well because it's thinking about the next class, or during the learning, again, thinking what if they get a low grade. And in the assessment, sometimes it's so disruptive that some kids will blanking out. And even if they studied, if they are working hard, they will not be able to show their potential. This article I selected to give you an overview of core things related to maths anxiety. It was made by colleagues in Cambridge. So here you see 1,757 dots in the graph. And you have, and in the y-axis, what you are seeing is maths performance. So at the top, the high achievers, at the bottom, the low achievers. And in fact, you can see that we have white dots and black dots, sadly, black dots, representing a low achievement here. And the group of low achievement includes children with mathematical learning disorder, which is one equivalent that we have. In the same way you say dyslexia for reading, you have dyscalculia for calculation or for mathematics. So these are the individuals at the bottom. And also in the same graph you see in the horizontal axis, you are seeing maths anxiety. So in the left side, low anxiety, in the right side, the side of the letter A, then you have higher levels of anxiety. You also have this dashed line, this vertical dashed line to show you where it's becoming, let's say, stronger. Throughout many studies, you see the same negative correlation. So the higher is the maths anxiety, the lower is the maths performance. So that's a standard. But as you can see, it's a correlation of minus 0.30, which means that you have at least another 70 to explain other reasons to explain low achievement. So it's not only this, but this is one important factor. But the graph shows us something very interesting. 78% of children with mathematical learning disorder, they didn't show strong levels of maths anxiety. Okay. By contrast, if you're looking at the other side, you have average or above average kids in mathematics showing higher levels of anxiety. So that's a very perfect room to ask about it, because here we have all mathematicians. So I wonder if we can have someone confessing some level of anxiety here. So let me know afterwards. here I select one strong, very important systematic review, very robust. It has 223 different studies using scales to measure maths anxiety. So in summary, we can say that maths anxiety is present regardless of gender, regardless of ethnicity, absolutely in all continents, except for, apparently no penguins, but except for this, it's everywhere. And importantly, in different grades. And I'm highlighting here, circulating precisely first graders. So I'm saying to you that a child with 6 years old is showing maths anxiety. So this is alarming and makes us to think what parents are saying or doing, what teachers are saying or doing. So it's important for us to do this exercise and think about our attitudes while working with those kids. And this is the last slide about an overview. And here I'm showing you a neuroimaging study. So children were doing mathematical exercises while they were in the scan in the room. And we see an interesting pattern here. Individuals with high levels of maths anxiety were using their brains in a different way in comparison to children with low levels of maths anxiety. So if you look at the top, what you see is that children with higher levels of maths anxiety were activating more the right amygdala and the right hippocampus, which are areas circulated in orange. And those areas are important for experiences of fear. So if you, for instance, are showing images of snakes or any aversive information, it will activate this area of fear, okay? Or also you activate areas related to memories of previous negative experiences. At the bottom, you are seeing precisely what is more activated in individuals with low levels of maths anxiety. So they are activating different brain areas, as you can see here, left ventromedial prefrontal cortex and left intraparietal sulcus. Again, the areas are circulated and you see them highlighted in green. You don't need to be worried about the neuroimaging. It's just to understand why those areas are important for. So you are using this for attention, for memory, and especially for detecting differences in quantities. So those areas are crucial for calculation. So children with low maths anxiety are indeed doing maths when they are doing the exercises, while the others are really feeling the fear. Okay. Part 2, so let's talk about historical and environmental factors that are relevant for this talk today. So we are in the Black Heroes of Mathematics. We are talking about the Black community in special. So why we should be thinking of the need of highlighting this group in terms of maths anxiety. So let's start where everything starts, right? It starts for all, but for us especially. I would like to remember, of course, this audience knows very well that Africa is a continent, not a country, which means that even among the entire continent, you have different ethnicities, histories, experiences, socioeconomic, also experiences with colonization, which brings different languages and etc. So just pointing this. But there is something in common, especially to the west coast of Africa, which is the fact that we had the slave trade. And according to the books, it was only between 1650 and 1860. We don't know for sure, but anyways, that's the time we have documented. So people were, so there were people invading those areas and kidnapping individuals and making them slaves and enslaved. And they were brought to South America, to Central America, to North America. And you can see they just put the name here, Europe. Yes, we don't talk about this much, but anyways, those individuals then were enslaved in those countries and brought to work in agriculture of tobacco, coffee, cotton, sugar, rice, and also in mines. And what also is interesting about this is that it happened at the very same time in all those continents. And then when it was over, technically the same experience was repeated in all those places. So this is a model that explains why we are where we are now. Giving a big jump just for the abolition moment, instead of saying congratulations, you're free, actually the realization here is you have no documents, no family, no house, no work, no education, no health, no language. And that happened with slightly differences in time for countries. I'm giving here the example of 3 different places. And I would just mention Brazil, which was 136 years ago. And to give perspective, my dear father, which loves to do mental calculation, he is 93 years old. So as you can see, he's not far away in the lineage, right? And that brings me to the next concept I want to present here, so which is intergenerational mobility. This concept is estimating throughout many different countries from different continents how many generations you need to make a transition of an offspring from low income to average income, okay? And then each one of the dots representing a different country. Basically in the middle, you see a red a diamond representing the OECD average. So you know that in average, it takes about 4 generations. So we are talking about the grandfather, the father, the child, the grandchild. Sounds reasonable. And of course, we are talking about not cheating here. So we are not talking about someone that is stealing a bank or that won in the lottery. It's really the nice concept of meritocracy, which says, oh, if you work hard, you will get that. So that's the case. But if you look at specific places, for instance, in the right side here, you see Brazil, you see South Africa, Colombia. You will see that it will take about 10 generations. So we are still ongoing, right? It's a work in progress. Then let's bring directly our attention to education. So here I will highlight a letter written by a Black father, which was Alexander Clark. He's impressive for many other reasons, but this is one of the facts that I found really interesting. He wrote a letter to the Muscatine Journal and surprisingly was published. So thanks to this, we know about what happened. So he was telling that he was comparing the schools because he wanted to bring his daughter to a school that was near to their home. And so he was saying the white schools, and note that I circulate just because it's plural, they have globes, charts, competent teachers. The teachers had a salary that ranged between $700 and $900 a year. By contrast, the Black school, singular, had 1 teacher, singular, and the salary was about $200 in average. And this school had never prepared any person for the high school level, and was at least a mile away from the students, making it impossible for some of them to go to school, okay? So it's not simply segregation, it's about the quality of the education accessible for all, at least at that time, okay? And only 1954, US Supreme Court declared that it was unconstitutional to segregate schools. So finally, the schools becomes to be for all. So the level of education becomes for all. But here we go. We heard about policy today, and it's very important to say that, yes, policy is crucial, but doesn't mean that because it's written there, it's happening. So sometimes take long while to happen or not happen according to the plan. So here I give you an example that in 1957, so 3 years later, we're still having the population protesting against the inclusion of Black students. This one in the left, precisely Elizabeth, in the moment, at least according to the news, was listening, lynch her. So imagine how can you feel going to school not belonging, not having the right to be there, or not being accepted there. So it marks the development of someone. And I must point that those girls, they are now 82 and 84 years old. They are alive. So that's very recent in the world. This photo is well known. I think I don't need to give much detail, but it was only 70 years ago that Ruby Bridges was escorted by policemen to go to a primary school. And part of the story that's not mentioned usually is that, yes, she was in the school because it was her right, but she was not in the same classroom with others. If you read some documentation and some comments that even she did a podcast mentioned. So it took a long while to really have this effective. So all those experiences will bring what we call stigma. And I must say that unfortunately, in the past generation of some educators and even some researchers, they were just comparing performances without considering the context in which those kids were studying. So their conclusion was that Black children, at least at that time, were mathematically illiterate, okay? And that brings lots of marginalization, deshumanization, and yes, it's changing. We have the room with lots of mathematicians and people also attending the conference, but it's still small numbers. Remember when Professor Kimberly was showing the PhDs in mathematics, very few dots in comparison to the dots I saw you in my presentation here. So that's a very important aspect to understand why we need to pay attention to this community. And now I will just show you some of the studies, very few because we don't have much time. Again, I will keep my critical posture in my talk. So my first comment is that until very recently, basically almost all research in psychology was conducted by white researchers based on white samples and published in journals that had white editors. There's nothing against our colleagues, it's not the point. The point is lack of diversity and the need for us to be more and more encouraged to take part, take the lead, and contribute, okay? So I think we need to that. Another thing that I must say is that not necessarily is our fault, because this is just an example. On the left side, you are seeing the NIH number of grants. This was published in Science, just to make it a statement, but still not changing much. I have recent graphs from 2020 and still the same. So Black researchers, they have lower probability to be funded by the NIH and a few other agencies as well. And on the right side, what you see is that regardless if they are new or experienced researchers, overall they publish less. And as you know, if they publish less, they have less likelihood to get funded. So it's a circular process that never ends. Then keep talking about how we do very I think it's important to remember we had talks about statistics this morning, and that's a principle that we all learn very early in our courses. If you have a homogeneous sample, it will minimize the variability and will maximize the power that you want to detect, right? That's great. But unfortunately, this kind of principle justify you to not include all different, for instance, ethnicities or genders or any other kind of element that could cause variability. And then the recent researchers trying to get totally away and far away from the eugenics. So they are no longer trying to compare and say things in a way that is just harming communities. So sometimes they do not report at all as information about ethnicity, and that's negative for policy. Okay, so they become color evasive in their approach when they are mentioning in their papers. So that's another important thing, because then we don't know if the information you know about the scale or about ability or about the brain functioning, if it applies for all. Okay, we don't know. So now after those comments, I will show you a few studies. You will see that I will not present my research here, but I will show the work of colleagues and especially things that were done in the past. So here we have this paper by Young and Young, trying to do the psychometric properties of one scale that is one of the most used to measure maths anxiety, which is called Mathematics Anxiety Rating Scale, or MARS. It's a very nice name. And on this table, you are seeing precisely a systematic review that they did throughout the paper, and they are showing that there were 20 articles trying to do the validation of the scale, but only 6 articles were reporting data related to Black participants. And fortunately, the results are good because they were measuring if those scores were within the confidence interval, and fortunately they were. So it means that the scale is switchable for those students as well. So that's good. Here, as you can see, it's a more recent research. It's precisely from 2022. So as you can see the difference, they are clearly describing, stratifying the sample. So they put the percentage of females and all the ethnicities. White, Black, Asian, and Hispanic, which in this case was the majority Hispanic. And they are using another scale, which is the AMAS, the most used nowadays, basically, abbreviated maths anxiety scale. And they could see some properties of the scale, and one important factor that also helps you to believe on us as researchers. So when we use a scale like this, it is possible to predict the arithmetic performance of the students. So this is indeed working the way we want to see performance. And even the subjective perception. So when the student think, am I doing well in this or not? So that perception is also detected by those scales. Okay, now another study. And here I just remind you that they were trying in this case to contrast boys and girls. They were trying to see different ethnicities as well reported. And if you look at the graphic, I know that the image is not very big, but you are seeing 4 different lines. And the two in the top, at the top, they are representing white students. And as you can see, they are performing better in mathematics because the y-axis is about it. But then what's very, very important in this study is that we usually have this experience. When we talk about children, we don't see it very much, but in postgraduate level, in graduate level, you see more that you are the only Black student in the classroom, or you are the only staff at your university, in your department. This is a common experience. And some people would think that, oh, if you have more peers, that would be protective. And this study is showing that, at least in the students' level, it's not necessarily the case, or it has nuances. Because the Black students that had a perception that there were more peers that were looking like them, those students, when they had higher levels of maths anxiety, which is represented here, they would show worse performance in mathematics. So unfortunately, it's not so protective as we wanted. So we need other mechanisms and other actions to help them. And this slide is about intersectionality, because I want to point here that's not just thinking about if the student is Black or white or Asian or Hispanic. You have other factors that will influence. One of them is gender, but you could consider religious or any other socioeconomic factors, many other factors. So this study was interested in girls particularly. So they measured the maths attitude in grade 1, and also they measured maths anxiety in grade 1, younger girls. So both were highly correlated, which means that if you have a student that is very anxious, this student also will have attitudes that are more negative towards maths. And if the student's low anxious, you have more positive attitudes towards maths. So that's why we know that we can act on the attitudes, okay? But when they look at just maths attitudes, it doesn't predict gender for maths achievement. However, maths anxiety can predict grade 4 maths achievement only for girls, and that's very interesting. So that means that we really need to act in this group of students. Note that the correlation is negative, showing clearly that it is indeed the most anxious that are being most affected. And here in this slide, I'm just showing you 7 different reasons or ways in which maths anxiety can affect Black students. So first of all, low expectations and callous attitudes from teachers. So that's very important to change. Overemphasis on fundamental computational procedures. Of course, this is important, but sometimes the student, we are interested to know if the students understand what they are doing, not just if they know how to do the proper notation. So we should balance a little bit this. Parental expressions of mathematics difficulties. I remind you that we are talking about intergenerational things, and it's associated, the lower is the socioeconomic status, the lower usually is the educational level. So that's why those parents might have more difficulties to help their kids or their family to improve in mathematics or to help on the homework, etc. Inadequate knowledge of Black achievement in STEM fields. So that's why we need Black heroes in mathematics, because that's a way to show excellency and competence and potential that this community has. Believe that special talent are needed. So why not just consider that the people that is here is good enough, right? We are always expecting to see the next genius that is coming, right? Like we are waiting for the next Einstein. Why not a female Einstein? Let's start. Or maybe it's already there. We simply don't know. Believe that mathematical ability is inherent rather than developed. So yes, Albert Einstein was a genius, but he had good schools and good teachers. Remember that. And then failure to be properly trained in early grades, which brings us back to that story of the quality of this education in the schools. So I selected this sentence by Malcolm Gladwell to finish. I have a few other slides, but if we don't have the time, I can finish here. Gladwell, I think it's an interesting figure because his mother was in psychology, his father was in mathematics, which is pretty much a combination that interests me, but also he was half Jamaican, half British, and perhaps that's why, as a journalist, he was trying to do some amazing points and also amazing talks. So he's saying, in this case, he was giving a talk at the Pop Tech conference, and he was talking about the United States. So he said, we have a scarcity of achievement in this country, not because we have a scarcity of talent. We have a scarcity of achievement because we are squandering our talent. So that's a big message for all of us. We don't have time, right?
You can say this last slide. Your final remarks? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go.
Okay, so this is just my final remarks. So I want to point here that my perspective is that law numeracy is a multi-layered a fact. So we cannot just tackling this picking on the kids, okay? You need to do something that help parents, help teachers, and help the child. We need to do things that are important in terms of policy. I will not present my research, but we did 2 important studies. One was the Eurythmus project, the other one is the Enigma project, which you can find information in some other places. And I think I can simply finish here. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you.
Okay, very good. I have to disagree with you on a point.
Okay.
Yes.
Always.
Yeah, I have to disagree with you on a point. I think, and I'm sure that everybody in this room will agree, that, I know you're saying you're not a Black hero of mathematics, but you certainly, given that presentation, you belong here. Yeah. Does everybody agree?
Agree.
With regard to that insight that you brought, you know, we some aspects of that we hear it from within the maths community, but actually where you're coming from that fresh perspective, you know, and certainly what we were seeing in terms of that intergenerational, when you actually pointed out that your father is 93, but slavery ended in Brazil 136 years ago, and you're thinking, wait a minute, that's way too close, way too close. That hit home. So you belong in this conference, just talking about this topic, and you know, I'm glad that you didn't persuade me that you shouldn't be here. I'm glad I persuaded that you actually do persuaded here, you know, to be here. Would you agree? Would you agree? Yeah. Am I being fast? Yeah, I'm bad. One thing that I do this talk called the Black Heroes of Mathematics, you know. So, yeah. And one of the things that when I was doing my research and when I was talking, and it does link to, let's say, maths anxiety, and this is there's something called stereotypical threat, where the individual, you know, will say, well, look, if I do mathematics and fail at mathematics, would actually be confirming one of those negative statements against Black people, that we are intellectually inferior, and that actually plays into anxiety, because that's just me just doing my research. But from what you're seeing, what you've been saying now, I can actually see that there's all that things that actually complemented and coming from a different angle. But thank you so much, very much indeed. And you're on the panel, so we're going to ask you more questions on that. Yeah.